So hello and very good evening to everyone. We are here today to kickstart the IN Thought Leadership series uh, with a special focus on how India is transitioning from a service-led nation to a product-led nation. Now, when we speak of moving to a product-based economy, there's definitely one industry that is widely spoken of today, right? And in today's session, we would like to speak more in detail on that industry and throw light on the semiconductors and electronics industry and how it will be pivotal in shaping the next decade of development for India. And for this, we have the three stalwarts of the industry with us today as our panel. So I would like to take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Ajay Chaudhary, entrepreneur, author, advisor, philanthropist. Dr. Chaudhary dons many hats. His role as the co-founder of HCL needs no introduction. As a very esteemed IN board member, Dr. Chaudhary has played a leading role in the establishment of the electronics industry in India, serving on government committees since 1999. He's been the chairman of the Mission Governing Board of the National Quantum Mission of India, distinguished fellow at Niti Aayog, and fellow at the Indian National Academy of Engineers. He's also a member of the advisory board of India Semiconductor Mission, been conferred with the prestigious Padma Bhushan Award, amongst many others. He's chaired the task force created by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, studies of which formed the foundation of India's electronic policy. Now, as we proceed into the session today, request everyone to put their questions in the Q&A box, and we will take these up post the discussion. Now, with this, I would like to I would like to invite Dr. Chaudhary and all the other panelists. Very warm welcome to all three of you, and thank you for joining us today. Dr. Chaudhary, I'd like to invite you to lead the discussion from here, and over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Smriti. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. So good afternoon. Today's session, I'd like to kick off by giving you a slight overview of what we really want to do in these thought series. Firstly, as I see, the country has to move from services-led economy to a product-led economy. Today, if you look at it, India's exports are 60% services and 40% commodities. But if you compare that to China, China's 80% commodities and products and 20% services. As we see, services-led economies fundamentally going to face a lot of headwinds. And therefore, as a strategy, the country has to move towards making its own products. Today, due to the geopolitical situation, there's a tremendous opportunity for India to be part of this whole approach of being a product nation. So therefore, today what we are doing is that we are fundamentally going towards wanting to look at electronics and semiconductors as a very large opportunity for investors as well as startups. So today I have two panelists with me who have been in this industry for a very long time. Let me first introduce Sanjay Naik to you. Sanjay is a co-founder of Tejas Networks. He's a pioneer in this area. And this is literally the first large product company in telecom that was created in India. And I think I'll leave it for him to tell you a little more about it. And before he actually started Tejas Networks, he was also the managing director of Synopsys in India. So very long relationship with electronics and semiconductors. And he has received many accolades and awards in the country for what he has achieved. Recently, Tejas was acquired by Tata's, and they also won a very huge contract from BSNL for the complete 4G stack. So that's a very interesting opportunity that they got, and they actually seized it and delivered upon it. Now, let me introduce you to Dr. Satya Gupta. He has been in the semiconductor business for a very long time, and he created Uh, After working for Intel for around 14 odd years, 12 odd years, he created 4 successful startups. And pretty much all of them were in the area of making semiconductor chips. So who better than him to talk about how to start a business in this whole area? He also co-founded IESA, which is the Indian Semiconductor Association, and today is the president of the VLSI Society of India. So with that introduction, I'd like to take it forward to ask a few questions of the panelists. And we will also keep looking at the questions that all of you might have on what we can actually respond to as we go forward. So with that, Sanjay, as I mentioned earlier, you are a pioneer in this whole area of creating products in India. And this was literally the first company in telecom products in India. So what does it take to create a product company in India?
Thank you, Ajay. First of all, honored and delighted to be a part of this very important panel. I think the timing of this discussion couldn't be better. I think as the new government has taken over and as India is setting out its aspiration in terms of becoming a Viksit Bharat, I can say with a lot of conviction that what we are discussing today is directly relevant to that, because electronics and semiconductors are the heart of almost anything that happens in the economy. And I think from a geopolitical angle, self-reliance angle, stability of the economy and etc. It's important. So coming back to what it takes to build a product company, I started Tejas in 2000, so it's about 24 years back. It wasn't that fashionable at that point in time to do a deep tech pure play product company. So like Ajay, what you did in HCL in the 80s and 90s, we did that when this century started in telecom. And the vision was really to build a global product company from India. So the conviction was always there that as Indians, we have enough technical firepower to build whatever products that need to get built. And I still say that in 2000, and I'll still say that today, that we should take it for granted that we as Indians can design and build the absolute latest and the greatest product that needs to be built in whatever segment of electronics or semiconductor that's out there. The challenge which one has to overcome in this journey is, once you build the products, how do you sell, how do you scale, how do you make it globally successful, how do you make profits, and how do investors and all stakeholders make money, and how does one create an institution? I think that is very hard. And I start off with what Elon Musk said recently, that hardware is hard. But the good news is it's not about hardware anymore. It's hardware plus software plus systems plus a lot more other knowledge, the domain, etc. So I really think that when we started Tejas, a lot of that ecosystem wasn't in presence. For example, the EMS industry, which is very vibrant in India today, didn't exist in 25 years back. Literally, the EMS industry has grown over the last 10 years. The component industry wasn't there. The government policies weren't there. So I think a lot of things have moved in the right direction. In terms of the hurdles that we crossed, some of the hurdles, I guess, are not there anymore. So I think the ecosystem is a lot more ready today, whether it is the EMS ecosystem, the government ecosystem, the component ecosystem, and even the market access related ecosystem, because that's a very important element for getting the success. However, what is still going to be a tough problem for people to overcome and solve is at 2 dimensions. One is at a technology level, one can think of 2 kinds of products. Let's call one is the established product, like a telecom equipment is established product, a laptop or a tablet is established product, or audio system is established product, for which there are incumbents from around the world and they're all selling the stuff in India. So one has to think of, if you're going to compete against these established product category, where is the innovation going to come from? What are you going to do different? And why do you think you can win against these incumbents? So I think that's one part of the ecosystem, an answer that we had to solve 25 years back. People still have to solve that today. The second one is, assuming you build the product, how do you get past the economies of scale? Because in hardware, which is what some kind of a system will be there or chip will be there, the initial cost will be high because you are still producing in low volumes. You may have the most efficient design, but if you're going to get to scale, how are you going to get to economies of scale? So either having government support or a large anchor customer support is going to be very crucial. So I think that would be the second challenge in terms of getting from a product to a business. The last part I would say, which is very important, is that building the right team. So I think we're still evolving the ecosystem in the country. So I would say that the R&D talent exists. but the product management talent in terms of design for cost, design for testability, design for manufacturability, and even the product management in terms of product market fit, what to do, what not to do. A lot of that elements needs to come into place. The sales elements need to come to play. A lot of the hardware which is sold in India is sold by multinationals, and the Indian salespeople almost carry on the brand of the multinational and sell the products. But when you have to establish your own brand, when you have to get that, that's a different issue. So these are the challenges which we all overcome. And proudly, I think we have, and during the course of the conversation, we'll discuss different elements of it. But my thinking is that we figured out a way to get past it. So on the positive note, these are all important challenges. They were bigger challenges 25 years back, much better ecosystem today. We figured out a way to get through it, created, as Ajay said, a multi-billion-dollar company. And I'm proud that that can be done. And that's what gives me confidence that where we are today, this is possibly the best time to be a product entrepreneur in the electronics and semiconductor space. So that's where I pause, Ajay, and then over the rest of the conversation, we'll carry it further.
Thank you, Sanjay. So, Satya, you came from Intel and then created many chip design companies. And you're pretty much one of the pioneers having done that. Why did you start a chip design company? And where did you finally take it?
Yeah, so thank you, sir, and good to be with the panel, on the panel with Sanjay and you. Uh, we, I started my entrepreneurial journey around the same time when Sanjay did. Sanjay started Tejas in 2000, 2001. We started Open Silicon in 2003. And the whole idea was that basically there were not that many chips being designed in India at that time. And what we call in chip design a tape out, right? The tape out culture in a very disciplined and uh, in a manner which basically can create a global impact was not done, right? So 5 years at Open Silicon, we created 150 chips, which is today also, if you look at any company, that's a very high number with a small team of about 100 people. So we brought that disciplined silicon engineering culture to design the chips to India. And a lot of people who worked in Open Silicon are basically doing very well in the industry. So I think the doing at that time was certainly challenged. We did not have the infrastructure. I'll not go on the ecosystem. Sanjay has already talked, but basic infrastructure, design support, server, EDA tools, all of them basically were a big challenge. We solved it in a very efficient manner, and we created a kind of a company, worked with almost 400 worldwide customers. Designed basically more than 150 products, and not just design, took it to manufacturing and took it to volume production, so that basically the products could be sold worldwide. Some of the chips which we designed went to basically do almost 25 million volume in terms of the number of units, like things like HDMI. And we worked with almost every big company in the world, Northrop Grumman to Microsoft to Rockwell Collins, anybody who was basically planning to design a chip, basically we worked them to design the chip and establish a culture. In terms of basically electronics and the way people understand, we established a ODM model for chips. We call it fabless companies, but in terms of general knowledge, we became one of the largest ODM of basically chip design for the world, right? Where
Can you explain what is ODM, Satya, for the audience?
it's a original design manufacturer where customer comes with a concept and then you design and manufacture it basically to take it to the volume, right? So if you want to do a product, you can do a basically high level conceptualization. Then we'll take that concept and design a chip, manufacture it, basically do the qualification and take it to the high volume production, right? So that's typically in electronics industry, ODM is a well-established term, and Sanjay obviously is very aware of it. And in the process, we work with every aspect of the ecosystem. We work with basically 7 foundries, all the way from TSMC to UMC to basically SMIC, and you name any foundry which is basically does wafer manufacturing. We worked on with all of them. We worked with the IP vendors, Synopsys, Cadence, ARM, and all of them, and package and testing people. So that helped us gaining the complete knowledge of the ecosystem, that how the whole industry works, even beyond the design. So today, whatever is happening basically in India for semiconductor manufacturing, I think that a lot of basically lessons which we learned at Open Silicon and subsequent company could be very useful in building a business ecosystem around the fab, right? Fab is a factory. They will produce something, but there has to be enabling business ecosystem around it. I think that has to be basically created if the fabs have to be successful. If the fabless companies have to be successful, that ecosystem has to be designed. In the end, I'll just say that basically, as Sanjay said, time is right for electronics and semiconductors. We have about $200 billion of electronics today gets consumed in India, and only about 10% of that get basically manufactured in India. If we take semiconductor, we consume about $25 billion of semiconductor, and less than 1% is basically designed or manufactured in India. So opportunity is very large. With the basically goal of Viksit Bharat in 2047, I think this market of electronics product will reach somewhere around $3 trillion consumption in India and almost $700 billion of semiconductor consumption. Even if we take a goal of doing 50% of that through Indian company, through Indian products, the opportunity in front of is huge and humongous. And lastly, I'll say the road to Viksit Bharat in 2047 has to go via electronics and semiconductor. And as basically a big leader of the country said, sahi samay hai, abhi samay hai, right? So time is right, time is now. We need to act now.
So actually, this whole discussion on semiconductors and electronics is something that is really very current in the last 5 years. What we have seen is huge amount of export taking place of products from India. But these kind of products like phones, and whether we look at the the EMS companies, which are the manufacturing companies, they're all really doing service work. So even when you look at software, what we export out of India is services. And even in electronics today, what we are doing, where we have become so huge, is also services. In the last 10 years, lot of electronics manufacturing moved from China. And as it moved from China, it went to Vietnam, it went to Malaysia, some little bit has come to India, and it's also moving to Mexico. So there's a huge movement taking place out of China, which presents the opportunity for startups and companies in India to actually get into the act of designing and making products in India, whether they are chips or systems. So that is why we are having this interesting discussion today with Sanjay and Satya, so that we understand what is this opportunity that is sitting in front of us. So Sanjay, coming back to you, product companies in India are very rare, except in software. Software in the last 10 years, we have traversed the path from services to products. So today we have companies like Zoho, which is $1 billion company. So these kind of things have happened in software. Where should we go in electronics? And what is the role for startups that you see?
No, good point. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, that the focus has to be very clear, because if you try to solve the wrong problem, technically we will build the product, but we will not build a business. So I think the way to think of the electronic product opportunity can be in two different dimensions. In dimension one, let's talk of the established product that I mentioned earlier. In that, I think we should look at large indigenization opportunity where there is a reason for India to create Indian products. So in a sense, they could be, for a lack of a better word, let's say they could be Me Too or Me Too plus products. But because there's a strong push for indigenization, there is an opportunity that gets created from a business perspective. Example of that could be in the defense sector. So suppose something we are importing from abroad, if an Indian company creates almost similar stuff, I think that's a great opportunity because we would rather buy an Indian product versus importing. So that could be in one category, or telecom for that matter. Telecom is also security sensitive sector. So I think that's one opportunity, one kind of opportunity. The second kind of opportunity for products I see is in the disruptive category. Disruptive product category could come from the fact that there could be a new standard coming up. For example, 5G is already done, but 6G standards are coming up. In different domains, new standards coming up, whether it's in audio, video, or stuff like that. Or medtech could be another area because of the advancements in electronics and semiconductors and software over the last 10, 15 years. There could be a complete rehaul of the kind of devices that get created. So I think there are a lot of areas where a lot of new disruptive tech is coming. And I think their startups can really put together because they don't really have to combat an incumbent of a like-to-like kind. They would be combating an incumbent which is kind of an older generation incumbent. So I think these are two broad categories in which one can focus on, and one has to look at the specific sectors and create an opportunity or a niche where they can win. The second area where I think they can create products, again, I'm still talking systems, I will leave the chips to Satya, is what I call subsystem level stuff. So again, let me give an example. At the end product level, it's a base station, let's say, or if you're thinking of a automotive, it's the end car is the end product. But inside a car, there could be an engine control unit. Inside a washing machine, there could be a controller board. Inside a microwave oven, there could be something. Inside an AC, there could be thing. There could be a communication module which sits inside zillions of devices. So if I take those subsystems, which are modules, which could go into very large volume devices for which manufacturing is already happening in the country, it will serve two purposes. One, it will create a captive base for you to replace something that we're importing because it's a subsystem level, and you still don't have to go to the end system brand level problem, which is what we talked earlier. And that itself is a very large opportunity. So let me give you another example. Let's say lasers. If you see lasers or optical transceivers, as they're called in technical language, are needed in everything. Every communication device will need that, whether it's a router at home or a transmission in the backbone or in a data center. Now, just the laser market in India alone could be about $500 million, which we are importing. And it's not very complex technology. These controllers, lasers, these are relatively simpler technologies which can be put together. And because of the volume economics that we have in India, we can make a viable business. So that's the second level in which we can do things. Third level, I think we can do, which I think is again an opportunity, is we can jumpstart certain kind of technologies which are kept and proven in friendly countries, let's say Japan or Korea and stuff like that. So let's say there's a display technology which Japan developed and put a lot of R&D dollars 10, 15, 20 years back, and hasn't come and seen the product volumes because they said that, oh, China or Korea has taken over, so let's not bother about it. We could take that base technology, develop it further, and really scale it at Indian market initially, and then a global way. Think of it like what Maruti did in terms of Suzuki, where they took a base technology from Suzuki, developed it a lot more and created. So I think these would be the different dimensions in this startup should play. But again, my strong advice would be look at not that you can build this product, I've done, because engineers will have a tendency to say, oh, I'll build this product. It's a very exciting thing. I build this. Assume it will get built. The second question is, how will you sell? Whom will you sell? What is the competitive differentiator? How are you going to get past the economies of scale handicap? What is the technical differentiation that you can create depending on the latest technology? So focus more on differentiation and selling and the ability to sell rather than on solving a problem and creating the product, because that we should give enough credit to the ecosystem and to the people that it will be done. So that's what I would
You pointed out two very important areas. One is the end product itself, which needs branding, sales, manufacturing, marketing, everything. And the second area is where you actually make sub-assemblies and let's say motherboards and stuff like that. That doesn't need branding. That doesn't need marketing.
Absolutely.
It fundamentally needs sales. So if you can actually do design and manufacture in large volume, the market is immense because this whole market is totally imported today from China. And this we can immediately replace. So this is a terrific opportunities for startups to look at. And if they can design some of these sub-assemblies and get them manufactured in India, they could replace all the imports from China. And the government will definitely support this because they're very keen to have a situation where we can be Atmanirbhar in many, many ways. So I think this is another very nice opportunity that you pointed out to startups. Satya, let's come back to you. what is the opportunity for startups in designing of chips in India?
So I think looking at the top level number first, we consume basically about $25 billion of semiconductor chips today. And probably by 2030, that number will be basically about 150, 200 billion. And by 2047, it's going to be about $700 billion. So there's a lot of consumption. But I think from an opportunity point of view, we have to look at electronics and semiconductor together, right? So like Sanjay talked, right? If we focus on the products which are done by Indian OEMs, let's take the example of basically electrical two-wheeler scooters, right? That is a product completely being done by Indian OEMs. Lot of capital goods like air conditioner, washing machine, this, and so on and so forth, they are done by OEMs. Now, when they have to buy sub-assembly or the chips, right? They make the decision what chips have to be bought and where they buy it from. If I compare that to basically, let's say, a mobile phone, right? When Oppo does manufacturing in India, the decision about what components to use and where to buy is not made in India. That's either made in Shenzhen for basically Oppo, Vivo, OnePlus type of the phone. For Apple, it's made in Cupertino. For basically Samsung, it's made in Seoul, right? So if we focus on the products where the OEMs are in Indian and basically there is potential to grow and what semiconductor needs they have. For example, if you take security and surveillance camera. We installed so many security and surveillance camera. Can we design a basically video encoder decoder chip basically for security camera? Can we design a small microcontroller which goes into BLDC fans? Can we design a small microcontroller which goes into basically washing machine, microwave, and all those things? And some of this can be done in a platform also. Like I can design a microcontroller which can customize for one application or another application. So that's a one area of basically startups which can be done easily. The second area is basically the larger and more complex chips, like the things which gets used in AI, HPC, high performance computing, servers, and so on and so forth. That also is a good opportunity, but it takes more investment and more time, right? So what has been done and what is our attempt, Ajay sir, myself, Sanjay, and other people who are working with the government, right? We came up with this scheme, design link incentive. Before this scheme for the chip design was announced in 2022 by the government, most of the route for the government funding was through academic institutions. This was the first scheme where the direct funding was available to companies to develop their products. And if I can say in one line, the aim of this scheme was to remove all the barriers for the chip design startup and make chip design startup as easy to do a software startup, right? You have an idea, you have a laptop, you have three guys, you go on beach and start coding, right? Rest of the infrastructure will be provided to you in terms of funding, in terms of the EDA tools, in terms of manufacturing support, and all those things which people consider as a barrier by the government. So ideally, the aim was to make a chip design startup as easy as basically a software startup where you have an idea, laptop, three guys, and you can start doing it, right? So that's what we are aiming for. It's a beginning. We have about 14, 15 companies which have been basically approved under DLI. And the aim is in next 2 years, we'll reach that number to 100 companies.
So that's a very interesting opportunity. I mean, you have pointed out something quite similar to what Sanjay was talking about. When you do sub-assemblies, you're also talking about controllers, etc., microcontrollers that can be designed in India. Because if we look at the whole situation during COVID, we fell short of semiconductors all over the place. And as a result, supply chains were very badly disturbed. So we just can't be in the same situation all over again. And therefore, India needs to step up and create its own systems and its own chips and slowly over a period of time replace what we are doing from China. But Sandhya, there's one more aspect that I'd like you to throw your mind on, the security aspect of importing chips from China.
So if you look the evolution of basically chips, and if I look 10 years down the road, every chip which we use for any appliances will have a wireless connectivity. Okay, it's happening almost 50-60% of every product will have a wireless connectivity, whether it's a cellular, Wi-Fi, BLE, Zigbee, whatever form, basically it will have a wireless connectivity. And when 99% of the devices which you use in day-to-day life, critical infrastructure, and everything else, that means you are very vulnerable, because in wireless, it's very difficult to manage the security if your hardware is not securing it, right? So both at the chip level and the system level, looking at the way cyber security threats are increasing and the way basically people are able to hack things, right? Uh, except one product in the country which cannot be hacked, which is EVM. Everything else basically can be hacked because it's wireless and all those things. So building current cybersecurity as well as the 10 years down the road when the quantum is taken the place, right? We have to take a proactive approach to build post-quantum security in our devices, right? Because once the quantum is there, all kind of the current encryption, AES 128 and all those things can be broken within minutes, which with the current technology will take 10 years. When the quantum is there, you can break this current security protocols within minutes, right? So that's a huge opportunity, because now we can design products which are basically compliant with post-quantum security also. So that also creates an additional layer of the opportunity for Indian startups that work together, chip designer, system designer, and the quantum, basically people who are developing quantum security technologies, work together and create the products which are secured for the future, when every chip is wireless, when every chip is basically connected in some wireless protocol, then we can secure our information and critical basically data.
Ajay, just to add one
Go ahead,
small
Sanjay.
point
You were
to,
saying something.
yeah, just to add to one very small point to the security aspect. You mentioned the security threat from China. I must also clarify that when you're talking of security, it doesn't matter where the chips come from, because a copy of all the data or sensitive data of India going to any third country, whether it's in the East or in the West, and both of them are notorious enough for not necessarily being trusted. So I think there's a security element which will only come when the IPR, the design, the internals of the chip to the lowest level are known to the Indian company, which is under a sovereign control. So that's one element. The second element of security, which we should also not forget, especially in the context of the 10 and 20-year plan that we're all looking at, is the supply chain security. So if you rewind 5 years back, China was able to get every single technology and every single chip and every single aspect of anything from anywhere in the world, because everybody was interested in selling to China. Suddenly, for whatever geopolitical reasons, there's a sense of technology denial in a much larger way that has already happened to China. India has gone through that technology denial thing also some years back, or 15, 20 years back. So I think both from an angle of at least critical technologies, we need to be self-sufficient, so that in case there's a technology denial, or at least we should not be subjected to a unfavorable negotiation because of not having indigenous technology. I think is another reason from a security angle that one must consider.
So, Sanjay, I'd like to come to another point with you. What are the challenges in India for funding product startups in electronics?
So I think from an investor angle, the first challenge that comes in is that how do I make money? In the sense that there aren't too many success stories, and a product startup, especially in the hardware electronic side, you have to make a lot of, or at least I would say, a reasonable amount of investment upfront. Because it'll take time to build the product, prototypes, get it to some scale, and at the initial scale, of course, you're not going to be making money. So I think there's a longer runway of upfront investment that is needed to get to a point where you could be break even, etc., compared to a software product where there's no bill of material, there's no tangible stuff that you need to buy out, etc., etc. So that's problem number one, which is a challenge that investors face. Second problem I feel is that, and this is also related to the earlier question that you said, the role of startups in this whole ecosystem. I think we need to see a lot more M&As happening in addition to IPOs kind of exits in the startup worlds. And the way they will happen in the electronics ecosystem is that if if entrepreneurs start solving niche problems, which could be system level, subsystem level, which become a part of a larger solution, so they don't have to on day one solve all the problems of branding, economies of scale, etc., which larger companies who have already scaled up can do. So if you really see how Cisco built up the whole ecosystem of communication startups in the Silicon Valley, Cisco's probably acquired about 250 companies over the years. So I think we need to see similar anchoring by motherships in different verticals of electronics, whether it's defense, medtech, communication, consumer, whatever, so that the startups start creating a lot more funnels where few entrepreneurs come, create a very interesting, very competitive product, fills in a part of the ecosystem, goes going. So I think those kind of ecosystem, if it starts happening, or at least when investors start seeing exits of that kind, that would also be quite interesting. Third, I think so far the government support, which is really needed in my mind, and I know Ajay, we both have been discussing this, is in terms of demand aggregation. So I think we need to find a way, in a fair way, that if an Indian startup creates an Indian product which is designed in India, all the IPR exists in India, then given like-to-like scenario, I think they should get an opportunity to scale up and get past the economies of handicap in government procurement, and between both center, states, and even some incentives which can be provided to private buyers in the form of demand aggregation if it's a B2B business. That would be another area where I think the policies are coming together. And if that happens, that could become a very good way for startups to create products, get it to scale in India, and then go global. So those are all the challenges which I think are there currently. I'm sure a lot of the other ecosystems challenges in terms of finding more R&D dollars. Hopefully that gets solved, because there's a lot of intent from the government to fund R&D and to create domestic products. And like Satya was saying, in the chip category or even a lot of the design tools are available, capital subsidies are available for all of that. But really, I would say the market access and scaling up is the challenge. Building profitable business and scale is another challenge. And those are things which I guess the entrepreneurs will have to crack. And the last, again, as I said, the teams become very important. So I think if the experience comes either from India or global entrepreneurs from US or people of Indian origin, if there's a company which has that element coming together, so that experience gap is filled, and then the challenges of not making too many mistakes when you make the products is also solved.
So actually, there are two very large things that have happened in India. One is the defense area, where IDEX program came in, and they said, okay, if you design a product and we like that product and it meets our specification, we'll give you business. And it's the same model what America followed in DARPA. And the same thing happened in BIRAC, where the biotechnology part of the government said, okay, if you make the product, we'll give you the money and you make the product, and we'll also buy the product. So look at how during COVID, Bharat Biotech got created out of the BIRAC fund. So there is a direction very clearly there, with government support and with the private funding coming in and patient funding coming in for startups in both systems and chips. And I think we are starting to see large number of deep tech funds appear in India. And interestingly, a lot of them are looking at electronics and semiconductors. And the whole objective of today's discussion was to give an idea of the size of this market and the opportunity in India and how this can be really taken forward.
One comment I just want to add about the funding thing, right? So Sanjay basically talked about the challenges. I'll just say that the kind of the awareness which has basically grown in the funding ecosystem in last 2 years, I'm getting at least basically two calls from some investor or other that they want to understand basically this space, and they want to basically know about the meaningful startups which are there basically in this space. So there is a huge amount of the interest both from Indian investors and the global investors. Now, if we feed them the right type of the startups, that is a job of all of us, right? Ajay, me, Sanjay, and all the people, there are a lot of knowledgeable people on the call also, right? We have to feed the investors the right kind of the companies which are making meaningful products and solve the problem of scaling, economies of scale, volume, sales, and all of those things. Investors are very much interested in investing. Second thing is that, yes, we don't have too many basically success story, but typical return of money to the investors has been very good and very quick, right? For example, our startup Open Silicon, when we started, basically we went to Series A, B, C, D, basically 4 rounds. We raised about $40 million. And within basically 5 years, we were able to basically exit at $45 million. Similarly, basically recently Sankhya exited, Steradian exited, Serial exited, and all of them within basically 7-8 years, they were able to return good money to the investors. So if the people are there on the basically call who are from the investor community, it is a kind of a perception has been created that the return of the money takes much longer in the software versus hardware. But if you go deep down, it is about the same. It takes 7 to 8 years to basically get an M&A done if you are working on the right kind of the technology, and similar amount of the time take any software company to reach to a milestone and get exit, either acquisition or IP or whatever it is, right? So I think one of the things which we are trying to do here together is demythify some of these things so that basically people can work on the real basically scenarios rather than the perception which has been created in the market.
So, Sanjay and Satya, what do you think is going to be the size of the electronics market? I mean, you did mention some figure earlier. Can you please clarify the figure and the time frame that you're looking at, both of you? What do you think will be the size of the electronics business in this country, let's say 10 years now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? And is it going to be really worth being in this business for startups and others?
No, absolutely. I
Today,
mean,
the consumption is about $200 billion. Okay. With basically $25 billion out of the $200 billion in semiconductors. So overall electronics market is $200 billion, right? If we take a reasonable growth rate to 2047, right? It basically becomes almost $2 trillion of domestic consumption. And if we put the right policies in the place, we can create $1 trillion of export market also, right? And now about 20-25% of the overall electronics, which is like domestic plus export being about 3 trillion, 25% of that market could be semiconductor markets, right? So these numbers are pretty big, and India being basically one of the large economy by 2047 can count on somewhere around 10 to 15% of the contribution to GDP coming from electronics and semiconductors.
So what's your view, Sanjay? What do you think?
no, I think so. I mean, as Satya said, the numbers are very large in the long term. If I look at by 2030 or so, the numbers that we believe are close to $400 to $500 billion of size in India, with about 30% domestic valuation, which you're talking about $150 million of valuation. And then if by 2047, if you take 25 years approach, it's about 2.5, 3 trillion with 40% valuation, which is about $1 billion of valuation. Why I'm talking of valuation, which is very important, because that is really where we are going to play in. Otherwise, as Ajay mentioned earlier, see, there's a lot of what has happened in the last 5 to 10 years in India in the electronics manufacturing, quote unquote manufacturing, I would say, is more about assembly and putting together stuff that comes in the form of kits from outside and then gets manufactured. So, for example, today, if you look at the domestic electronics industry, the valuation would be anywhere between 5 to 10%, which means if you're producing $100 worth of something, $95 worth of components or IPR in direct to indirect form is being imported. So the real opportunity of the next 10 years is to, of course, continue to do the manufacturing part, which will have its limitations in terms of valuation, but really to focus more on design-led manufacturing, where we own the IPR, we own the design, and that actually starts with even the definition of what is an Indian product, because today there's a lot of confusion of made in India, made by MNC in India for foreign. But what we are really talking of which is making Indian products. Indian products are stuff where the design is in India, the company is globally headquartered in India, the global profits accrue to the Indian company. That is what will create the economic value add. And I think the intent of the government and the ecosystem is really to invest into and to create those Indian product companies. Like if nobody has any questions about Cisco or Ericsson or a Huawei, they will have global operations, global supply chain, global connectivity, but they are headquartered in certain geographies, and that is how they get designated. So I think, Ajay, the Indian products that we are talking of the kind that I just described, is the biggest opportunity for the next 10 to 20 years, because this technically is our sweet spot today. We have about 30 to 40% of the world's chip designers actually working out of India. There are at least 25% of the world's system designers in at least few industries working out of India. So that talent is already available. The home market is already available. Government wants to do this stuff. So what we need to do is that get this push of creating more Indian products of the different kind that we talk. And the validation opportunity that will create is also an important function, because another way to think of when we talked of economies of scale, if the valuation is higher, you are less susceptible to the economies of scale handicap, because if 50% is your material cost and 50% is the cost of your IPR and design, even on the 50%, if you are having a handicap of 10% or 20%, you can overcome that by the IPR edge that you have. Versus if you're going to do a product which only 10% validation or 15% validation, if you have a 10% economies of scale handicap, you don't have a business. So I think value addition, creation of products, and economies of scale in a way are all related. These are all ways that we have to solve the problem. And this is where we have to look at what our strength is. And the strength is hardware, software, system design, because that is really what is an electronic product today.
To add some more clarification point to what Sanjay said, I think one of the basic myths in people who are not from the field, what is manufacturing and what is product, right? Typically, people confuse the manufacturing with the product, because in the traditional industry, let's take a cement industry or a steel industry or something, product and manufacturing used to be synonyms, right? But electronics industry about 3 decades back basically segregated the product and manufacturing as two different activities, where manufacturing is just a service like any other thing, like Ajay sir said in the beginning, right? The manufacturing is purely a service. And if we look at basically electronics product, which are assembled or manufactured, they add about 6% of the value as a revenue and 3% as of the value of the product as a profit. But when you do products, those numbers basically get multiplied by almost 10x. A typical product company makes almost 30 to 40% gross margin, where a typical manufacturing company makes about 3 to 4% of the gross margin of the product, right? So we are talking about a scale of 10x to 15x basically in terms of the gross profit. And gross profit is the one which adds to the domestic ecosystem, domestic basically economic progress, because whatever gets generated by gross profit either get invested back into R&D, or basically it creates the wealth for the people who are doing it, right? So I think this clear-cut understanding what is a product and what is manufacturing in context of semiconductor and electronics product need to be understood by everybody, because everybody goes says manufacturing kar lete hain, right? Manufacturing in electronics is a very low end activity, irrespective of what is the value addition. Manufacturer cannot do much value addition. Product companies have to do much of the value addition. So I think in mind of our policymakers and big people, we need to create a clear-cut demarcation, but what is manufacturing, what value it can add, what is product, what value can it add, and Sanjay said, what is an Indian product and Indian company, right? I think these definitions need to basically be very clear in people's mind. Because I get a lot of people say, oh, India should do a lot of chip manufacturing, right? But really they mean is India should do a lot of chip products. So that definition has to be basically clarified, because they need to understand manufacturing is just like a factory. It does basically the job of a factory, right? Whereas
So actually,
product designer does a different
Satya,
job.
I'll have to stop here. There are lots and lots of questions out here. Maybe I'll just pick up a few and try and answer them through all of you. First question is that why companies need to design customized chip? Why not pick it up from Intel?
So I think maybe I can answer that first. So it is not by the so first and foremost thing, we should not reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. So for example, let's say a chip, Intel can give you a chip at the price point that you need, and gives you supply chain guarantee, does all the stuff that you need. Absolutely don't buy that chip, or don't build that chip, buy it automatically. You should do something where you can do something very specific, very validation, versus, there's definitely no need to do chip for the heck of it. Strategically pick and choose the battle that we want to fight. So do few selected chips, not all, and as time goes by, we can do more.
My simple answer is that basically, jahan sui chahiye, wahan hathoda kyun marna hai, right? Basically,
Exactly.
why we need to do the Intel chip with a small,
Yeah.
simple chip, right?
Yeah.
We are trying to solve a problem of a needle by putting a
Yeah.
hammer onto it, right? They are different, basically, chips. Intel chip will cost you $100, $150. A small microcontroller will cost you basically 65 cents, or LED chip may cost you basically 4 rupees, right? So everything basically depends on the cost, power, volume, all of those kind of things, right?
So basically, there's another question. It says, where do homegrown Indian R&D and Indian software stand to possibly backing Indian semiconductor companies? Can they really support this? Is what happens abroad? Will it happen here?
So I would say that the good news is that the software ecosystem in India is quite evolved. So if you look at the embedded, so essentially the kind of software that will be needed along with the product or electronic product ecosystem is embedded software. So if you really look at it, there are many companies, the ecosystem in India and embedded software is extremely strong. If you look at, for example, auto sector, communication sector, even medtech, I think the global GCCs of various global entities in India have tremendous amount of talent in the embedded software ecosystem in India. So I think that system both within Indian companies and otherwise exists. I don't see that at all as a challenge coming together in terms of creating Indian products.
So actually, somebody has.
I'll answer the question slightly differently. See, software creates the application, which create the business. Now, to serve those applications, if we do the electronic devices and the chips for basically serving those applications, I'll take a concrete example. UPI is basically everywhere today. Okay. And now everybody is getting a voice box basically which says that this much payment has been received. Now, this ecosystem has been created by the software industry because of the UPI. Now, can we leverage it that basically every voice box and the chip used in the voice box is designed in India? It's a very simple product. But now this has been enabled by basically software layer of the applications which we are doing. And this can be done in AI, this can be done in MedTech and so on and so forth. So application layer will create the large uses of certain technology to serve the technology rather than using basically a voice box from Shenzhen, with 99% of our voice box was designed by Shenzhen, some small company. We can do that basically ourselves, and that's how software will create a opportunity for both electronics and semiconductors. Voice box, basically, some of you sitting in this thing, you can design within 1 month. It's not a basically at all complex product. Why are we importing that from China? I don't understand.
So there are very similar questions from many people. And, there is a question from somebody who's ex-Intel. We should also need to think through education and spread awareness regarding semiconductors, regarding fab due to high OPEX. We don't have any startups. Should we think ISM, so Indian Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, etc.?
I will basically, I think since this relates to education, right? I will basically take it little bit more deeper. Today, if you look, semiconductor and fabs are basically much further, but our enrollment in ECE branch at the college level are 50% down. And whenever I go and basically visit these colleges or school students, the awareness of basically what are the possibilities in these branches is very low. All the basically hype and awareness has been created for computer science. So computer science enrollment has basically gone 25-30% up. And EC, which used to be prime branch basically 5 or 7 years back, lot of basically colleges are shutting down because they are not getting the people, right? So I think before we go to fab and all those things, which is also happening, but we need to create awareness among people that basically the career after doing a college degree in EC, VLSI, semiconductors, and so on and so forth is as rewarding. There are enough jobs in this thing because that awareness is not there. People say hardware mein job nahi hai, right? Hardware is very hard. As Sanjay said, hardware is very hard, which I do disagree completely. Hardware is today as simple as a software, basically,
Agree.
and I talk about it a lot when go to a student because I say writing a very long program is as simple as writing a Python program, right? Sanjay, sorry to say that, right?
Hardware is easy, but building a hardware company is hard, is what I really meant.
Hardware company is okay, but hardware
But,
is not hard. I think because that message is going wrong to the basically high school students. They say मेरे को कंप्यूटर साइंस किया आराम है, अगर मैंने इसी किया तो बहुत काम करना पड़ेगा. Okay, I think that messaging has to change at the ground level. Obviously, we need to create awareness of semiconductor. What is a fab? I saw one of the question basically on the question box that what is VLSI, right? So that level of awareness we have to create among the college students and other people also. But I think we are sitting in a very dangerous territory when our EC enrollments are dropping by 50%, right? I think we need to address that at education level.
So actually, this is the reason why we are having these sessions when we are saying that the economy has to move from services to products. Services is where the business was till yesterday. If you look at the software services business, and especially if you look at the BPO business, there are serious headwinds to these businesses today. You start to look at Gen AI, you start to look at what Gen AI can do to a BPO business. There is a serious issue out there. People are not talking about it openly, but there are issues like that. And therefore, whether the students or the startups, everyone has to start thinking products in this country. And we will be talking in future about other products also in this thought series. Today, we picked up electronics and semiconductors because it is the hottest thing that is being talked about today. And if you look at the future, fundamentally, hardware and software are two sides of the same coin. You can't do without either. And our strength in India is what makes us better placed to do hardware. We have design capability, we have manufacturing capability, we have software capability. Software layer sitting on top of any hardware makes us really, really very competitive and be positioned wonderfully well in the world. So with that, I think we'll have to call it off now, Smriti, because it's already 5 o'clock. There are so many questions. We'll try and see if we can pick up those questions and send some answers later. Okay, we've picked up a few. Time was very short, but we could not take up any more.
We really appreciate, and yes, we have run out of time, so we would have to sort of wrap up the session for today. But yes, that's very kind of you, Dr. Chaudhary. If that'd be great if some of the questions can be answered. But for today, I think we really enjoyed the discussion between the three of you, and I think there was a lot that we could take out of the discussion, great insights. And I do have some questions of my own, and I would love to sort of have some questions answered. Right. But I mean, thanks a lot for joining us today. I really appreciate on behalf of all the, participants and on behalf of IN that three of you could join us today and share your time and insights with us. So thank you, Dr. Chaudhary, Mr. Nayak and Dr. Gupta for this. And thank you all the participants who took the time out. We had a great audience today. So thank you so much for joining. And we look forward to having you all on the next session of the Thought Leadership series. Which will be announced very soon. So we'll pick up another industry, as Dr. Chaudhary mentioned. We'll be doing a series on different industries, and we'll keep everyone tuned on the next one. So thank you so much, everyone.
As a message for everybody on the call, they can reach out to any of us on the LinkedIn and send the question to basically individually direct also. We will either respond on the LinkedIn or basically get onto a call with them to basically give them basically if their questions were not answered today, they can connect us on the LinkedIn to basically get their questions answered or any discussion they want to have one-on-one basis.
Thank you so much, Satya, for that.
Sure,
Yeah,
that's
that'll
very
be
helpful.
wonderful.
Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Smriti,